This man saved pennies for 45 years. Then he cashed them in, and the total amount is astonishing. No one would have thought that it all began with a single penny, but that's exactly how it started. It was in the early 1970s when Otha Anders, a teacher from Ruston, Louisiana, dropped his first penny into an empty jar. Not out of necessity. Not because he was particularly poor, but because he was looking for something that gave him consistency. A sign that even the smallest things can have meaning if they're treated with respect. Every day, whenever he saw a penny on the ground or received one as change, he saved it. And each time he said to himself, "I'm grateful." Because that was his ritual. For Anders, every single penny was a symbol of hope, of discipline, of gratitude. When the first jar was full, he placed it in the corner of his bedroom. Then came a second, then a third. He never stopped. Friends asked why. His wife sometimes rolled her eyes, but Anders simply smiled and replied, "It's not about the money. It's about what it means to me." Over time, Anders's penny collection became more than just a habit. It became a kind of diary of his life. Each jar held memories of a difficult day he overcame, a moment of joy, a conversation with a student that stayed with him. Whenever he dropped in a new coin, he never did so thoughtlessly, but with the awareness that it marked another day he had made it through. And so, in his house there wasn't just a worthless collection of copper, but a quiet, shining story of patience, discipline, and gratitude. Every new penny meant more to Anders than just a piece of metal. It was a symbol, a sign that the day had counted, that something had been set aside again. Anders developed a quiet routine. Every night before going to bed, he would empty his pockets, examine the coins, set aside the pennies, and drop them into the right jar. What was meaningless to others became, for him, an act of consistency. The jars filled slowly, but Anders didn't care about speed, only about the discipline behind it. Over time, the jars became silent companions of his life. They stood neatly organized throughout the house, in the garage, in a small storage room, sometimes even under the bed. Each jar told a different story. The oldest one dated back to the late 1970s, when Anders had just started his first job as a teacher. Another filled up during the years he cared for his wife. There was even one jar reserved solely for special pennies, the first penny from his first student, a lucky penny given by a stranger who once told him that small things can mean something big. Friends and neighbors often thought he was a little eccentric. "Why are you still collecting those things?" they asked with a smile. But Anders just smiled back and said, "Because every cent is a step, a silent proof that I kept moving forward." As the world around him grew louder and more chaotic, his ritual remained simple, quiet, and unwavering, and no one had any idea how large the collection truly was, or what kind of impact it would one day have. The morning of October 15th began early. What happened next made history. The morning of October 15th started early. The sun was just rising as Anders opened his garage and stood in front of 15 massive water jugs, each one filled to the brim with decades of patience. 5 friends and 5 family members arrived one by one, curious, amused, yet full of respect. Together they loaded the heavy containers onto a truck. Every move was deliberate, every lift careful, because they all knew this wasn't just spare change. It was the life's work of a man who never stopped believing that small things can achieve something great. When the truck pulled up in front of the Origin Bank branch in Ruston, Louisiana, a moment of silence swept over the scene. Customers turned their heads. Employees looked out the windows. Then the big unloading began. With a dolly, a handcart, and plenty of laughter and amazement, the bottles were rolled into the building. The tellers, at first skeptical, began to realize this was no joke. The atmosphere was electric. What started as a quirky moment turned into a full-blown spectacle. People took out their phones, filmed, applauded. It wasn't just a deposit. It was a story that needed to be told. Anders stood quietly nearby, his face calm, his eyes sparkling. As the coins were being counted, he told the amazed bank staff his story. A story of small steps, of patience, of perseverance. And finally, the incredible number appeared on the screen. A total made from hundreds of thousands of pennies. No one at the bank would ever forget that day. And Anders? He smiled, not because of the money, but because he knew. His story had touched many hearts today. As the final coin is counted, a moment of awestruck silence falls over the bank. Then, the final amount appears on the screen, a 5-figure sum made up of countless ordinary pennies. The staff is stunned. Customers begin to applaud spontaneously. But more powerful than the number itself is the realization. These coins represent years of discipline, consistency, and trust in the small things, the unnoticed, the ordinary, the easily overlooked. The story spreads like wildfire. Local newspapers report on it, videos of the bank visit go viral, and Anders becomes a symbol of a way of life many had forgotten. Not wealth through luck or risk, but through endurance, patience, and daily acts of quiet intention. He is invited to share his story, and everywhere he speaks, he leaves behind sparkling eyes and new thoughts. It's not the money that impresses, it's what it represents. For Anders, however, everything remains simple. He continues to live modestly as he always has, but deep inside he now knows that his quiet philosophy has touched many hearts. Maybe, he thinks, someone will now stop and pick up the next penny they see, with a smile. Because Anders showed that the small things often hold the greatest value, and that true greatness sometimes lies in a handful of copper. This story reminds us that true greatness is not always loud. Anders didn't impress through riches, titles, or fame, but through perseverance, humility, and the ability to stay committed to something others gave up on long ago. Each individual penny may have seemed meaningless, but together, they told a story of 45 years of dedication, and in the end, it became not just a remarkable sum, but a legacy. Maybe there's something small in your everyday life that you've been overlooking, an idea, a dream, a quiet habit you've underestimated. Anders' story shows us. It's not always the big leaps that change our lives. Sometimes all it takes is not throwing away the first small penny, but giving it a place. 45 years, 15 water jugs, millions of small moments. Anders' story shows us. It's not the big gestures that make us unforgettable. It's the small, steady steps taken with heart. If you enjoyed this story, give us a like, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring content, and remember, even the smallest penny can hold the greatest value. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.